Okay, so here's a thought. What if, just maybe, the end of the story isn't actually the most important bit? We sort of race through books, don't we? We're eager to see how it all wraps up. But is that destination really always better than the journey?
It's a really interesting question, especially when we're, kind of conditioned to see the ending as the big payoff, the point everything leads to.
Totally. And that's what we're diving into today, based on some really fascinating source material you shared with us, excerpts from a discussion all about book endings.
Right.
So our mission, basically, is to unpack these ideas, try and figure out what makes an ending satisfying or, well, not so satisfying.
And maybe challenge our own assumptions about how much an ending really dictates the whole experience.
Exactly. And the starting point in the source material is kind of surprising, actually.
Yeah. The author shared this confession about how they used to read.
Oh, this really grabbed me. They admitted they used to stop reading books before the end.
Like way before him.
Yeah, sometimes 20, 30, even 50 pages early.
Right.
They just sort of think, okay, I get it. I see the direction.
I've got the story I needed.
Right. And their interest would just fizzle out.
Which, understandably meant they were missing. Well, quite a bit sometimes.
For sure. They only really started pushing themselves to finish books because they needed to, join in online discussions about them.
And that was a bit of an eye-opener, I gather.
Huge. They found out those last pages often had these critical, story-changing twists they just completely skipped over.
Huh. Yeah. A bit of a crash course in sticking around till the curtain call.
You could say that. And look, while finishing books is standard for them now, the source author still says they don't usually get too hung up on most endings.
Unless they're really amazing or
spectacularly awful, yeah.
And the reason they give for that is pretty central to this whole discussion.
It is. They basically say they value the content, the whole experience of the story, the journey, maybe more than the final conclusion.
So even if an ending is a bit meh.
Right. A bit disappointing. It rarely ruins the whole book for them retroactively. They might think, okay, ending wasn't my favorite part, but the book could still easily be a favorite overall.
Now, this doesn't mean endings don't matter at all.
No, definitely not. The source discussion makes that clear. There are endings that just work. Like a perfect piece of music, everything clicks.
Everything aligns, right? Character arcs, plot threads, the themes. It all just comes together beautifully.
And then, then they're the other one, where it feels like the music hits a few really sour notes and the whole thing just feels off.
Yeah, jarring. So let's talk about those jarring notes first. What did the discussion say makes an ending fall flat?
Okay, a big one mentioned, this comes from an observation by Liz Ryan in the material, is an ending that makes everything you just read feel completely pointless.
Ugh, yeah. That's that feeling you get when it's like, oh, it was all just a dream.
Exactly. Or it was all imaginary, or maybe they forgot everything. It just pulls the rug out from under the reality you invested in.
Or another example from the source, undoing major character development. Not in a, meaningful, tragic way, but just hitting reset.
Which is so frustrating, because you've invested time and emotion in that growth. If the characters just revert, or the world basically just stays the same despite huge events, it feels like, what was the point?
The reader felt it all, it was real to them. And then the story ends by saying, actually, none of that really counted. It feels like a bit of a cheat.
Yeah, it really does. You spent hours, you cared, and then, psych, never mind.
Okay, so pointlessness is one. Another big issue highlighted was the lack of enough falling action.
Oh, yeah, this is huge for a lot of readers, based on the source. You get to the climax, the big fight, the final confrontation, whatever it is.
So the peak moment.
Right. It gets resolved, and then, bam, the book just ends. Silence.
There's no breathing room. No time to see the aftermath. We get so invested in these worlds, these people.
And cutting off right after the peak means you don't get to see the consequence, or the grief, the healing.
Yeah.
The cleanup.
The source mentioned examples like after a huge battle where maybe key people died, the world's changed forever.
And the next scene is just the survivors smiling and laughing. And you're thinking, hang on, the city's rubble, who's feeding everyone, who's mourning?
Or in a romance, maybe a massive, hurtful fight.
Yeah.
Resolved with a quick kiss and boom, straight to happily ever after.
And your head is still spinning from the argument on the previous page. Not giving that space for characters to actually deal with the fallout, the emotions, the logistics. It just feels really unsatisfying.
So that's the abrupt ending. But the opposite can also be a problem, the ending that's too clean. Overly...
right. This is where the story just hangs around way too long, trying to tie up every single tiny loose end.
Giving every side character a perfect happy ending.
Erasing any hint of trauma or complexity. It forces this, unnatural tidiness onto things that would realistically still be messy.
The source had that really striking example. A character naming a child after someone abusive to show forgiveness and reconciliation.
Yeah, that felt off. It's like the author wanted a neat resolution more than they wanted to show the character's actual, likely very difficult emotional reality after harm.
Exactly. Sacrificing emotional truth for a kind of manufactured closure.
Making characters do things that serve the plot's neatness rather than what feels true to who they are.
Which kind of leads into the last big pitfall they mentioned, forced character action. Deus ex machina.
Ah, yeah. The magic solution from nowhere. The situation seems impossible based on the world's rules or what the characters can do.
And then suddenly someone acts completely out of character or some new thing just appears out of the blue purely to fix everything. It feels artificial, doesn't it? Like the author got stuck and just dropped in an easy answer instead of letting the ending grow naturally from the story.
Okay, so those are some ways endings can really hit those sour notes. What about the flip side? What makes an ending feel like?
Well, like a symphony, according to the discussion.
The words that kept coming up were honesty and consistency.
Meaning, it feels earned. It fits the story you actually... Exactly. It fits the themes, the characters, the journey they took. Someone in the source discussion put it really well. Something like, you can sell me anything happy, tragic, open, as long as it stays true to the story's theme and wraps up the character journey in a way that makes sense.
That's the perfect counterpoint to those forced endings, isn't it? If the ending feels like a natural result of everything before, maybe surprising, but still makes sense.
If the groundwork was laid, even subtly, then it feels right for that specific story. That's the harmony.
It doesn't have to follow some formula. It just needs to feel honest to this narrative. And when it feels honest, it often works, even if it's not like your personal favorite type of ending.
Yeah, the source used Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way. It comes as a great example. The author admitted they didn't personally love that ending.
Right, they thought it was a bit cheesy, maybe aimed younger.
But they couldn't really fault it because it felt absolutely right for that story. It fit the themes, good versus evil, family, loyalty, sacrifice. It wasn't a cheat. It was honest to the tale.
Even if not their personal preference. That makes sense.
Another one mentioned was Catherine Valente's Night of the Mannequins. Apparently, it has a really shocking, out of left field conclusion.
Okay.
Your first reaction might, what?
But then, thinking back, or maybe on a reread, you see the clues were there all along, woven in subtly.
And once that last piece clicks, the ending makes total sense in hindsight. Not obvious, but deeply honest to the setup.
Interesting. That idea of groundwork being laid, even if you don't see it at first.
And Joe Abercrombie was highlighted too, especially for his fantasy. His whole approach seems to be asking, is this honest to the story and the characters?
Right.
His endings aren't always what readers expect, or even what they might want, not always the neat, correct ending, like, Frodo destroying the ring.
But they feel surprising yet.
Yeah.
Inevitable, somehow, given the characters and themes.
Doesn't have to be obvious for it to be honest. That feels like a really key takeaway.
Yeah, I like that.
And one last thing the source author mentioned, something personal that makes an ending really resonate for them.
Okay.
It's when the world and the characters feel like they keep going, keep living and changing after you close the book.
Ah, okay. So not that every single question is answered or everything's perfectly resolved?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It means the characters still face challenges, life continues, the world keeps spinning. Their story arc isn't, over, but they've reached a meaningful point within it.
It leaves you feeling like that reality exists beyond the page, almost.
Exactly. Not necessarily setting up a sequel, just a sense of continuation. Those, for this author, are some of the most powerful kinds of endings.
Okay, so let's loop back then. Back to that slightly unusual reading habit, stopping early, and the perspective that came out of this whole discussion.
Right.
While a really forced or dishonest ending can definitely hurt the experience, if the ending feels true, feels earned, like a natural progression.
It often doesn't completely wreck the entire book for this particular reader.
And the core reason, like they said, is they aren't reading the book just for the ending.
They're reading for the journey, right? The experience of being with the characters, seeing them change, their relationships evolve, the problems they face.
How they try to overcome things. That whole immersive process.
So while a good ending is obviously great, nobody's arguing for bad endings.
Definitely not.
The suggestion here is that from this viewpoint, the ending is crucial, yes, but maybe the rest of the story carries just as much, perhaps even equal weight.
The source author even wondered if that perspective, valuing the journey maybe more than the destination, was a bit odd, unusual.
But exploring why they felt that way actually led to uncovering these deeper ideas about what makes any ending work or not work.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about what we've covered, we've seen how endings can frustrate you, the reader, making the journey feel pointless.
Or cutting off too soon without enough falling action.
Or forcing everything into an unnaturally neat box.
Or just pulling a solution out of thin air.
And on the flip side, the great ending. They prioritize honesty, consistency. They feel earned.
They resonate with the themes and characters, sometimes leaving that world feeling alive even after the last page.
And wrapped up in all this is that core idea from the source. For some readers, maybe many readers, the real value comes from the experience of the story itself, the time you spend living inside it.
Which brings us right back to that first question, that provocative thought.
If the main thing you get from a book is that experience, that journey, how much does a less than perfect ending really take away from everything you already gained from all those pages before?
Is valuing the story's journey, the content, more than the final payoff, a weird way to read? Or is it maybe more common than we think? Perhaps it's how you already approach reading.
It's definitely something to think about. We really encourage you to reflect on your own reading. How do endings usually hit you? Are they make or break?
Or do you find, like the perspective we discuss, that a really great story can often survive an ending that's just, oh, okay.
What is it, specifically, that makes an ending amazing or truly terrible for you?
It's a complex thing, isn't it? This relationship between the story and its conclusion.
It really is. And thinking about it, like, this might just change how you experience your next read.